Thank you, Chairman DeFazio, Ranking Member Graves, and distinguished committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on an issue that is clearly of national importance. And I applaud your leadership in examining the impacts of foreign-owned and state-owned enterprises on the transportation sector and critical infrastructure more broadly. The subject is as timely as it is concerning, given the impact to U.S. economic power, national security, military strength, innovation, and of course jobs. At a top level, and I might note, covering so much terrain in 5 minutes is a tall order, especially for me since I've never had an unspoken thought, but I'll try. At the top level, from a cyber perspective, the threat comes in various shapes, sizes, and forms. Intentions vary, as do capabilities. Topping the list are Russia and China. They are both advanced persistent threats, and both countries have turned to proxies to do their bidding. The primary concerns include computer network exploit, or the theft of information to include intellectual property and other forms of espionage, as well as the mapping of critical infrastructure, computer network attack, or the means to disrupt, destroy, or modify information and/or their systems, and of course the insider threat. In relation to both Russian and state-owned enterprises, I wanted to underscore that companies may willingly or even unwittingly serve as conduits of sensitive information, as legal provisions in their countries require that they share information with the security services, and they can even be compelled to do so. To give a sense of the scale and scope, I thought I'd quickly tick off a very few examples, and I'll focus on China since they account for over 90% of DOJ's economic espionage prosecutions and a vast majority of the cyber espionage cases. It's also worth noting, as General Adams brought up earlier, the Made in China 2025 plan, most of the technologies targeted are directly in the Transportation Committee's jurisdiction, and those that aren't touch your jurisdiction in an integral kind of way. But to paraphrase Mark Twain, and I'm not going to go over all the espionage cases, whereas history may not repeat itself, it tends to rhyme, and there's a whole lot of rhyming going on right now. Taken individually, each of these cases, you can understand why people would brush them off. In the aggregate, however, it sends a very strong and compelling message to our national security interests. CRRC, we discussed briefly, or General Adams did, the significance of it having a foothold in our supply chain in some of the biggest cities in America, obviously at 20 to 50% procurement bids under the competition. This is an unlevel playing field, but it is, again, consistent of a broader pattern here, a broader strategy here. Drones, what most people don't realize is Chinese manufacturer DJI has largely captured the American UAS market. And in 2017, U.S. Customs authorities alleged that drones produced by DJI provided China with access to U.S. critical infrastructure and law enforcement data. Major concerns abound where the data resides and whether it's corrupted and/or transmitting data back to third parties. Cameras, Hikvision. They're the biggest company in the world right now in terms of video surveillance equipment, and they've had access to U.S. infrastructures, including schools, prisons, and even sensitive military and government installations. 5G, Huawei, ZTE. The strategic significance of 5G as the bedrock upon which telecommunications and so much more will rely has direct relevance to the transportation sector. Not only does the attack surface grow exponentially, but smart highways and vehicles of tomorrow will be paved in silicon as much as they are in asphalt. This would be the tech equivalent of building on quicksand, since 5G is going to be at the very core, at the operating systems of our smart infrastructures. This is the crux of the executive order that the President promulgated last night. Financing. Foreign proxy entities can step in and scoop up U.S. assets and entities on the verge of bankruptcy or seeking startup capital. These are two primary blind spots in CFIUS. Those are two issues that I think the committee can play a role in elevating, since China was the largest single foreign venture capitalist in the United States cumulatively between 2015 and 2017. The grid. More than 200 Chinese transformers have come into the U.S. energy sector during the past decade. Previously, there were none. And I can go on and on and on with the lists, but let me just close with there are certain things we need to be able to grapple with here, and what we can't afford to do is grind the U.S. economy to a halt with blanket or overly blunt measures. Instead, we need to tailor and calibrate our responses to limit collateral damage to U.S. interests. National security and free markets are not either-or propositions. They're not mutually exclusive. We can and must do both, and I'll touch on any recommendations during the Q&A. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sorry for blowing the good record.
Yeah, no, it's only 28 seconds. You're doing this is a good panel all